So James, how do you see the sort of the role of the members' experiments going forward for the next 60 years of the organisation?
Well, I think, as Anton said, it'll be a development. But I think what we will be doing increasingly is reacting to the needs and demands of the communities that we want to engage and we want to serve. And I think, as we all know, over the last few years, we've seen a huge rise in people wanting to be more sustainable, wanting to know where their food is coming from, issues around food safety and food security. Just in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been an enormous increase in the number of people becoming vegetarian and indeed becoming vegan, and a lot of interest from people who want to be able to grow at least some of what they're going to eat. And many of them people who are not traditional growers and perhaps are not growing in a traditional way. So the millennial generation, as Anton says, much more used to engaging through social media and online engagement, very often not having a place of their own, so having to grow in containers or to grow somewhere in rented accommodation. I think we need to respond to that appropriately. We want to engage that younger generation and show them and persuade them that actually they can participate in these experiments, which will be part of their future.
Yeah, and so it's very much sort of using the members' experiments as I suppose always have been done, as a sort of a learning process. It's about learning about how to garden, it's about learning how to do using different techniques in the garden.
It is about learning, but I think it's also being part of a bigger enterprise, actually showing that what you're doing is contributing to something else, to a bigger picture. And again, over the last few years, we've seen a huge rise in things like, the great bird, people looking out for birds, and the great, garden hunts and so on. By a number of organisations, we've seen a huge rise in this, and of course we have a wonderful track record. We've been doing members' experiments for 60 years. We are the original citizen science organisers, and we want to build on that as we go forward. We just need to engage people probably in a slightly different way to that which we've done traditionally, and that's exactly what Anton has been talking about in the way in which we want to go forward.
So could you see that the members' experiments you try to attract non-members as well to go sort of nationwide with gardeners nationwide?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we are seeing all sorts of initiatives, and many of those are online. We ourselves, within our charity, have an increasing number of followers and supporters on social media across a variety of channels, and they are genuinely interested in the contribution that they can make. We see that we've got a generation coming up which is very concerned about what the previous generation has done in terms of environmental sustainability, in terms of the future of the planet and so on, and that generation is very interested in getting actively involved. And that's not just going out and going on demonstrations and so on, but it's actually doing things that they can practically do themselves. And these members' experiments is an ideal way for people to actually make a contribution, not only for themselves personally, as Anton says, perhaps growing their own lentils, which is something a lot of people will be interested in actually doing, but feeling that they are part of a wider picture which is actually making a difference in terms of our outlook on food and health and what we can grow. And as I say, I think there is a genuine feeling of change for all sorts of reasons at the moment, and we need to capture that, and we need to allow people who perhaps historically were not growing in this way and not doing members' experiments, that actually they can do it. If you're living in a rented flat in a tower block, if you're living in a tied accommodation, if you are sharing an allotment, all those people can participate in members' experiments, and let's encourage them to do it.
And over the years, it's obviously been shown that it is a very good way of innovating within horticulture, and this is indeed how many of the innovations within organic horticulture happen. And of course, these days, citizen science or taking this approach of research is much more widely accepted, even within the sort of the scientific world, and that's really welcome. I think that it's now we can talk about it in the science community as well. I
think there are two things there. I think first of all, you're right. The scientific community has come to understand that there is both qualitative and quantitative approaches, and that actually having a significant number of people engaging in an experiment will add considerably to the relatively limited amount of work that you can do as a paid scientist in a laboratory or elsewhere. And I think that's important. I think the second thing is that it means that there's more legitimacy, I think, to outcomes. And we can say over the years our members' experiments have made a significant contribution in some areas to the way in which we grow and garden effectively. And I think, Anton, the carrot root fly is a good example of that, which I think you could probably tell us about.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a while back that they experimented on looking at the heights at which carrot root fly at, and they found that by putting a barrier around crops you could actually significantly reduce the amount of carrot root fly damage, and that's something that is now in all sort of gardening textbooks as a result of these members' experiments.
Yes, absolutely. I think it was in the 70s when apparently a member from Manchester first suggested using the carrot fly barrier. And yes, that was, I mean, that really is a good example of how members experiment with a technique, and then there is almost immediate technology transfer, or the uptake of the results happened overnight, and it became very much a standard practice within. And of course, comfrey is the other big innovation that really can be attributed to the Garden Organic members.
And I think that's a very good example. And I think over the years we've obviously done a significant amount of work with members' experiments on comfrey, and we've not only worked out essentially which are the most appropriate varieties for domestic use, but we've also worked out a whole variety of the ways in which you can use comfrey in the domestic and non-commercial growing environment. And I think Anton raises another good point, which is that quite a lot of the research in the past has been focused on agricultural practice. And if you look, for example, at some green manures, which at times are still recommended, in fact you really need a plough to dig them in appropriately, and actually for the domestic garden they're really not so relevant. So I think the members' experiments have really allowed us to look at the best practice for the majority of us ordinary growers and gardeners, and it's made a significant difference in a number of ways. So long may members' experiments, or whatever we decide to call them in the future, long may they last, because they are making, and will make a significant contribution to the way in which we're able to take control, essentially, of what we're growing and how we manage it in the future.
And how we manage our gardens. That's great. That's great. Thank you very much.